Hello, everybody. On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly mini-series about books, culture, and what to read next. I'm Sarah Marie, and this is your Information Reader Services Department. In this episode, we're excited to share with you what we have been reading, watching, and/or listening to during Shelf Isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to Readers Roundtable expert and moderator, Michelle.
Thanks, Sarah Marie. As I talked about last week, I was going to do a reread of Let's Pretend This Never Happened by Jenny Lawson, which is a really humorous story of her really crazy childhood growing up in rural Texas, which includes pet raccoons in her tub and taxidermied animals talking to her. It's a really funny, just humorous read. Her style is very stream of consciousness or conversational. So I do highly recommend if you want to listen to her on audiobook. They're very good that way. And if that one doesn't sound like your style, you definitely should read her second book, which is Furiously Happy, which is a really fantastic book where she talks a lot about her mental illnesses, which includes depression and anxiety. They're really good. So those are definitely highly recommended. Secondly, I watched a documentary. It was called Ex Libros. It was by Frederick Wiseman. It is a documentary that takes a behind-the-scenes look of the New York Public Library and all its branches. Actually, a fun fact, I found out that Frederick Wiseman edited 150 hours of footage into a 197-minute documentary. It's a really interesting look, and it's one of the credit-free viewings on Canopy. So that sounds interesting. You can watch that and it won't take any of your Canopy credits. Last but not least, I've started my second complete playthrough of one of my favorite shows at the moment. It is called The Untamed. It is a Mandarin language Chinese fantasy magic adventure drama. And it's about two soulmates who travel to solve a series of crimes. It's so good. It has a huge, fantastic cast, beautiful costumes, breathtaking scenery, wonderful music, great storylines. There's politics, there's war. It's just so wonderful. It's also very daunting. It's 50 episodes. Just 2 words of warning. 1, there's lots and lots of blood, so if that's not something you're interested in, then maybe that's not for you. 2, when you watch the first 2 episodes, you'll seem to be very confused because it seems like you're in the middle of the storyline. You are, but it's highly recommended. It's just so wonderful, and I'm so happy to be doing my second watch through. And it's available on Netflix, and you can actually also watch it on YouTube, and it has really great subtitles. Again, that's The Untamed, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
Thanks, Michelle. Today I'm talking about 2 books. One is a reread titled A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which I actually read in high school and still have my original copy with yellowed pages. When I looked at the book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, it's by Betty Smith. I was shocked to learn when I flipped into the cover page, it was first published in 1943, which I don't know why I found that so surprising. It's the story of a teenage girl, and it's sort of her coming of age story growing up in the early 1900s in Brooklyn, New York. And it's really interesting to read it now as an adult versus reading it as in the 80s when I was in high school, and what my current opinion would be versus reading it all those years ago. So it's been quite interesting. My second book, which is a cookbook, is called The Silver Palate Cookbook, which I actually bought at the Highland Park Library used book sale many years ago. And I've always meant to try something from this cookbook. I never have, but in the spirit of using what's in my house, I had some sour cream I wanted to use. And so I found a recipe in the cookbook to make a sour cream coffee cake, which turned out amazing and everybody loves it, and got a lot of interesting recipes. And that is it for me. So I think I'm turning this over to Nancy now.
We have a special guest here, Benjamin.
Yeah. So I read The Silver Eyes, the graphic novel, based on the actual book written by Scott Cawthon. It's based off the video game series Five Nights at Freddy's, which came out in 2014, and then there are 7 games. Basically, it follows a girl named Charlie coming back to her hometown in Hurricane after there was gruesome murders a long time ago in this place called Freddy Fazbear Pizza. And so it closed down, and she's coming back, and she's like reliving all these memories that's kind of traumatizing her. And there's this night guard they built over this mall, and he's there, but something's not right about him. He's kind of sinister. He knows stuff that he shouldn't know, being just a night guard. And then the animatronics become sentient and try to kill them. I would recommend it for people who like horror stuff and character development.
Okay, thanks, Benjamin.
Yeah.
Continuing on the horror, I'm reading this short story anthology with the existentialist title The Wrong Coat. As short stories, it's available from our consortium. And one in particular is a story about sisters it's called Polar Bound. And in it, two twin sisters want to be different, and they get their wish when they get tickets to the North Pole, but one goes north and one goes south. Very interesting, well-written set of Illinois writers in this storybook. I kind of thought about Gogol's Overcoat when I first saw the collection, but there's a wide variety of stories in this collection. And as a disclaimer, the Polar Bound is written by one of our neighbors, Kevin Foyar, so that brought our interest to this set of stories. But they're quite good and they're available through our consortium. Now, on to Ravinia, new music. I discovered going through some programs again, a composer I didn't know called Franz von Suppé. He was born in Croatia in the Austrian Empire. But what I found out, we all know this gentleman and his composition. If you ever watched Popeye or Mickey at Mouse or Betty Boop, because it's his music that is behind so many of these cartoons. So it's kind of interesting to rediscover and to know that this person that was writing and well-known really lives on in all kinds of cartoons that's used over and over. And we do have at the library the print music and on Hoopla, and as well as some CDs with his collections because they're very popular. Many movie makers and graphic animators use von Suppé. Also, we all know now that Ravinia has been canceled sadly for this summer. It's not the first time that Ravinia closed for one time, several summers during the Depression, but also changed hands and changed direction more than once. This is the earliest broadside we have from Ravinia. It's from the Opie Night, August 15th, 1904. You'll notice they're doing high-class vaudeville. You'll also notice they did not serve alcohol because even before Prohibition, Highland Park was dry and Ravinia was expressly dry. And this is available on the digital, will be available on the Digital Library of America. So that's one of the reasons, too, that we see in Ravinia so many ads for soda, because organizations, bottlers, they made beer, they had made cider, and they wanted to still have customers and not completely go under. So they changed over to soda. But they also tried to promote things as beery. So you have an ad for soda you can buy at Ravinia when you go to visit to listen to opera. But you can also buy Buckton beer and flavors, as Prohibition prohibited people from drinking at all beginning in 1920. It went away, of course, repealed by Roosevelt, but in Highland Park, it continued at Ravinia until 1972 in the entire city. That's what I have today. Thank you. And now to Stephanie.
Thanks, Nancy. Well, I continued with the author Karen Odden, and this week I listened to A Dangerous Duet, which is available on Hoopla. It follows Nell Hallam. She's trying to get into the Royal Conservatory, and she doesn't have enough money. So what she's doing is she's dressed as a man playing in a second-rate hall, and she's the person for all the acts. She does all the music and stuff. So she gets discovered by a person who's not so nice, but he promises to keep her secret. And in the meantime, her brother is the guy from Scotland Yard, Matthew. He was in the book that I read, A Trace of Deceit, which I read the third book, then I read the first book, and I read the second. So characters throughout the book are reappearing, but the stories don't really tie in so much. But anyway, she kind of discovers that there's this ring of thieves that are going around, and they're using very young men. It's a very Charles Dickens-ish kind of thing. So it's like there's a exciting ending. And I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, that's her last book, so I've read all three of them. Hopefully she'll come out with a new one. Then the next one I read was Red Notice, which I'm sure a lot of people have read. I had it forever, and I finally got to it. And I must say that it was unbelievable. This guy, Bill Browder, he goes into Russia when the Soviet Union basically is falling apart, and he realizes that you can invest in like all these underrated companies. So he kind of sets up a hedge fund there. But then he gets sued by the Russian government saying that he owes all these back taxes, which he knows that he doesn't. So then it has like all these other people who are helping him out, including his lawyer who gets arrested. And it's just unbelievable. I mean, the story, but it's also interesting because it happened when President Obama was in office. And when they were trying to pass this law, because the lawyer doesn't have such a great outcome. And so there was this law that was passed in his name. And in the meantime, he takes on the Russian government. So he keeps fighting, and all of these cases, were basically thrown out. It's just like a really fascinating read. I highly recommend it. It was really, really good. But that's about it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gus.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. So lately, I've been doing a lot of work around the house. But when I do have some free time, I like to do audiobooks. I read and stuff like that, play games, as you know, in my other videos. But I'm probably one of the millions that are on hold for Erik Larson's new one, The Splendid and the Vile. So I'm waiting for that one. But while I wait, I still haven't read his previous book. The one he did before this came out in 2015. Called Dead Wake, and I got this on Libby. I just started it, and I love Erik Larson. For those who don't know who he is and what he's done, he's a very, very good nonfiction author. So if you like nonfiction, even if you don't, give it a chance. He's done books like In the Garden of Beasts and one of my favorites, The Devil in the White City. So I thought it was time to read Dead Wake. It is about the sinking of the Lusitania during World War I and the events kind of surrounding the sinking. I just started it, and he's a very good narrative nonfiction author. He does a really good job. It sucks you in. And so that's what I've been doing, Dead Wake. And also I've been playing games and listening to music. So my music recommendation is going to be The Beatles' Hard Day's Night. Play that. It's one of my favorite Beatles albums. I don't know why. I've been listening to it lately. Love that album. Also, I've been playing games. Here's the latest I've been playing. It's PlayStation 4, only on PlayStation right there. So you can't play this on Xbox, unfortunately. It's called Days Gone. It is a open world, post-apocalyptic zombie game. It came out last year, and I don't know, it's just fitting now. I don't know, but it's a really good game made by Bend Studio. They're really good. Did a lot of handheld stuff, but this is an excellent game. It is rated M for mature, so be careful. Only 17 and up. Days Gone. That's kind of what I've been up to. So I think I'm going to give it to Karen.
Okay, thanks, Gus. I'm also on the waiting list for The Splendid and the Vile. It'll be my first Erik Larson book. Anyway, as you can imagine, we get a lot of emails from publishers about upcoming books, author appearances, author tours, book clubs, and I've been catching up on some of that. And I came across a mention of Julia Phillips, who I talked about a few weeks back. And using the link in this email, I was led to a new book club, or a book club I'd never heard of, called Now Read This. It's sponsored by the New York Times and the PBS NewsHour. They do a book a month, and every week they post something. They have discussion questions, or they have maybe a glimpse of how the author works, author Q&A, but you can go back and look at the selections they've had since, I think, the beginning of 2018, and you can still watch these things. They do a very wide variety of books, and I thought it was interesting to kind of browse through and see what they had already done. So, trying to catch up on old email, and I have, of course, stacks and stacks of library books, and I picked up one called The Killing. It's actually, I grabbed it because I had read The Chestnut Man, and I wanted another book by that author, whose name I can't pronounce. Anyhow, The Chestnut Man was a Danish mystery, I guess, and I liked it, so I was looking for more by this author, and what I ended up with was something that was based on the original screenplay by the author I liked. The book is written by David Hewson, based on a TV series, and since I'm not a TV watcher, I didn't even know about this series called The Killing. Danish series picked up by the BBC, and then there was an American version done of this maybe 10 years ago, and extremely popular, but of course I never knew, so I'm experiencing this for the first time. It is I don't know if you can see, a 700-page book. I'm about this far, maybe quarter or third of the way. It's interesting. It's very short scenes, almost as though you're watching a TV show. I like the characters. I like the way it began. Gives you the hint of the crime scene. And then you see this female detective around 40. She is supposed to move to Sweden. Her last day at work, she's packing up her belongings in her office, and a man walks in with a big box of his own belongings. He's the new detective, I guess. After her farewell breakfast, a call comes in. She says, "Oh, I've got all day, I'll take it." So she goes out and gets involved in this solving of a mystery. And at the point I'm at, it's about a week later, and she's still not made it to Sweden where she's supposed to be. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. There's a good 2/3 of the book to go, but I'm really enjoying it. So wanted to recommend that. And next we will hear from Lisa.
Thanks. So I have been reading this week Rainbow Rowell's Wayward Son, the sequel to Carry On, and I am really enjoying it too. It's more of the stuff I like, self-aware fantasy, lots of humor. I'd like it if the love interests would actually talk to each other, but that's kind of a thing in YA you just have to get used to, because that is all of it pretty much. And actually, on that note, the other thing that I'm reading is Re-Enchanted, and it is by Maria Sachiko. I am not saying that correctly, but it's a study of sort of the history of children's fantasy in the Western tradition, with the school of Oxford that sort of like bred all the J.R.R. Tolkien, Diana Wynne Jones, J.K. Rowling, all of that, and how they sort of influenced each other and what effect this had on the genre in general and how this sort of works out today. And I love this sort of thing. I love studying sort of the mechanics behind how a story is put together, especially when it's in fantasy. So I'm really, really enjoying this. It's super interesting. It is in our system if you wanted to put a hold on it. It's not available via ebook, but it's really cool. And if you like sort of academic style, like breakdowns of who influenced who and how this sort of happened, definitely look into that. And then the other thing I'm doing is working on a new knitting project, because we have a crafternoon. It's coming up this week, and the date and time will be in the show notes below. The last one was really fun. So if you like crafting, like knitting or anything like that, definitely join us. And with that, I'll pass it on to Sarah.
Thanks, Lisa. For my recommendations, I'll start with one from my 19-month-old. This is Richard Scarry's Cars and Trucks and Things That Go. I loved Richard Scarry as a kid. I think a lot of us did. And so since my child is becoming car obsessed, my mom sent this to him, and he absolutely loves it, and it's adorable. And I like that there's a lot to look at, so this will last him a long time. Right now, he just likes pointing at different random cars, but as he gets older, you find Goldbug on every page. There's a story that continues. It's a lot of fun. On to my recommendations. First book I finished this week was 500 Miles From You by Jenny Colgan. This is the third book after The Bookshop on the Corner and The Bookshop on the Shore, and it's the story of a nurse from London who, after having a breakdown, is sent to trade places with a male nurse from Scotland. So she goes and lives in his house, and he goes and lives in her nurse's dormitory in London. And it's very cute. They don't meet until near the end of the book, but they're communicating via email because they have to communicate about all their patient notes, and gradually the communication becomes more and more personal. Very cute, a lot of fun. It is not out yet, comes out June 9th. The print book is currently on order. If you want to put it on hold, it will probably be on Libby eventually too. My next recommendation that I'm reading this week has been Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Now, this is another romance. This is available on both Hoopla and Libby. Basically, the main character, Chloe, is a web designer, and she suffers from fibromyalgia, and she's sort of almost taken a break from life, just dealing with her illness. And so after a traumatic experience where a car almost hits her, she decides to get a life. And she makes this list of things that she wants to do, like going camping and meeting a handsome man. And so she meets this handyman who helps her with her list. But what I wanted to mention too was I was listing this on Libby, and other people have it on hold, so my checkout was about to expire. So I checked to see if it was on Hoopla, and it is. And I haven't listened to any audiobooks on Hoopla in quite a while, so I've noticed that the interface has improved. Wanted to mention that, like, you can navigate to different chapters now. I tend to alternate a lot between print and audiobook, and so it's nice to be able to jump to the next chapter. And also, Hoopla works on Amazon devices, and so I've been enjoying having my book on like every device in the house. So that's my other recommendation. Also, the sequel to this, which is Take a Hint, Danny Brown, comes out in June, and that's my recommendations, and I'll pass it on to Jackie.
Thank you, Sarah. So I mentioned before that I am doing a reading challenge, and one of the tasks for this challenge this year is to read a book by a Native American. So I decided to read a Louis Diedrich book. So I just went to this show, and I hadn't read anything by her for a long time, and I just picked, not knowing what it's about. It's a very interesting book. Cedar Hawk is 26 years old and is 4 months pregnant, is writing a journal to her unborn son about what is happening on Earth. There's been some type of biological event that has happened worldwide where evolution is actually reversing us. You're seeing plants and animals, insects that haven't existed for a long time, and newborn children may be born as a primitive species of man rather than modern man. So the book talks about what's going on in the world, the anarchy that's going on, martial law. The government has become a church of the new constitution because some people are turning to religion, other people are not. Pregnant women are confined to birthing centers. So it's a very confusing time, and Cedar is trying to adjust and writing this journal. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of spirituality in it because she is very spiritual, and it's a very interesting book. The next book is actually a compilation of 2 novellas and short stories about the same character. The book is called American Hippo, and it's by Sarah Gailey. And this particular book has the novellas River of Teeth, Taste of Merle, and 2 stories that involve the characters. And Sarah read a article that talked about how the U.S. Congress at one point had debated about whether to import hippos to the United States to live in the bayous of Louisiana. And that was in the early 1900s. But they, of course, did not import hippos because hippos can become feral and be quite dangerous. So in River of Teeth, she introduces the character of Winslow Houndstooth, who he's been given this great sum of money to get rid of the feral hippos that are in the Mississippi River Valley. So he hires this motley band of outlaws, and they have an adventure. It's a very interesting story. River of Teeth actually won the Best Novella Award from the Nebula Award in 2017 and the Hugo Award in 2018. So it's a very interesting book. It's an interesting cast of characters, and the story is fun. A lot of humor in it, but it is very much a Western, so there is a lot of violence too. But if you kind of enjoy something different, it's fun. American Hippo is available in the system. River of Teeth is available on the Libby app, so you can always try that. Those are the 2 books I read, and then I got to thinking the other day, when I was reading the Tribune, they had an article about how, just like many small businesses in the area are having trouble struggling during this time, that the small independent booksellers are also struggling. And so you may want to consider, if you're purchasing a book, going to one of the local bookstores, the Bookstall and the Lake Forest Bookstore and the Book Bin in Northbrook and Barbara's Bookstores in Glenview and Vernon Hills are offering curbside pickup in addition to online ordering. So you may want to consider, if you are purchasing a book, go to one of the independent bookstores in the area. It's important for us to support our local businesses. So I'm going to turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. The first thing I would like to recommend this week is a podcast called Books Connect Us. The podcast updates on Thursdays and Mondays and features half-hour interviews with a whole medley of authors. There are currently 10 interview episodes, and this podcast is actually hosted by one of the big publishing companies. So the authors they pull are pretty big names and pretty delightful. Some of the episodes I have really enjoyed listening to are with Taylor Jenkins Reid, Emma Straub, and Eric Larson, and that was a really good interview. The second thing I am mentioning this week is in conjunction with one of our other sister programs, Cooking with Books, which meets bi-weekly, and you can find more information on this via our events calendar and in the link below. I mentioned Cooking with Books because I am a great big fan of the Great British Bake Off, Great British Baking Show in the US, and one of their former contestants of season 6, Nadia Hassan, now has her own cooking show on Netflix. Nadia's show has 7 episodes, each for about a half hour, and they are just a pure joy to watch. I have yet to attempt any of the recipes that have been shown on her Netflix show, but I have made some of the recipes she shared on her Instagram account, which is freely accessible with an internet connection, and I will post a link to it in our show notes below. The only downside to these are that Nadia is British, and so all of the show's measurements and all of her Instagram stories measurements are using the metric system. So I've been having to do a lot of math. That is actually it for me this week. I'm going to pass it on to Catherine.
Thanks, Sarah Marie. So I have been reading a lot of comics on Hoopla, at home, and I have been enjoying the Descender series and subsequent Ascender series. These are written by Justin Lemire, and the artist is Dustin Wen. This story is set in a universe of 9 populated planets, and the tension, or I would say crisis at this point of the story, is humans versus robots. Humans created AI, but 10 years in the past of our story, gigantic robots called harvesters appeared out of nowhere. They killed a lot of humans and then they disappeared. So there was a subsequent backlash against robots. They were outlawed, and now humans are culling them, essentially gathering them up and killing them. But at the heart of our story is this little boy robot named Him21, who was a companion to a boy who lived with his mother on a mining colony. And he was actually switched off before any of this stuff happened 10 years ago. In all the chaos, he's basically just been off all this time. And then he's awakened by his little robot dog, and we sort of start the story. I really enjoyed these. The story is a little bit Star Wars-esque. A lot of stuff explodes, which makes it fun. But what really drew me in was the art. Dustin Wen does this watercolor art that I just loved. It's just beautiful drawn series and beautifully colored. So as I mentioned, it is on Hoopla. And I also have a cookbook to share, which is Melissa Clark's Dinner in French. This is a book that I just by chance had checked out from the library, and then it got shelf isolated at my house all this time. So we've been trying recipes from it. We really enjoy her previous cookbook, Dinner, at our house. Dinner in French, as the title suggests, is French-themed recipes. And being French cooking, they are a little bit more complicated than the ones in Dinner, but they have been delicious, at least the ones that we've tried. When I say we tried, my husband made them and then we both ate them. That's what I am saying when I say that we tried them. But we had pea and lettuce soup. I don't think I've ever had a lettuce soup before. It was with ricotta cheese. It was delicious. I mean, there's nothing like a lot of cream to make lettuce just even better. And then we also had a roasted butternut squash with hazelnuts and lime, which was an interesting combination to me, but that was just delicious. So I really recommend Melissa Clark and this cookbook in particular, Dinner in French, and also her other cookbook, Dinner. And with that, I will turn it over to William.
Thank you, Catherine. So I have been reading 20th Century Boys by Naoki Urasawa. Now, this is actually the second time I've gone through it, and this is the perfect edition, which I actually saw because someone requested it to the library. I already owned the original edition of the book, and all that's really in here are a couple of color pages, so there's not really that much of a difference, but I liked it. The story has a really interesting start. You have 3 scenes. The first scene is a boy in 1973 taking over his school's PA system to play 20th Century Boy by T-Rex, hoping for a youth uprising, and nothing happens. The second scene is sometime in the 21st century at the United Nations headquarters, where they are celebrating mankind just narrowly surviving a great threat at the end of the last century and bringing up a group of people to thank them for the work they did. And the third scene is a young woman sleeping restlessly in bed, having nightmares about an event that took place in the past, and wake up and realize, oh no, this thing is in fact happening again. The story is centered around the main character, Kenji, who's this 30-something slacker who's taking care of a convenience store with his mom and his sister's child, who discovers that perhaps there is a cult that is based on a book he wrote with his friends in junior high. It goes to some weird places, this book does, but it's probably one of the best manga series I've ever read. It's just a really good time, and it's worth picking up. I have also been reading The Jordan Rules by Sam Smith. That is because I am all about The Last Dance, and I've gotten really excited by it. And this is a really nice accompaniment to that series, taking its name from the system the Detroit Pistons used to defeat the Bulls 3 times in 3 consecutive playoffs. The thing I like about this is these are not the Bulls that are the 6-time champions. These are the Bulls in 1990-91 that are falling apart. Like, this is a team that really doesn't like themselves. They don't like each other. Everyone wants to leave. There's no proof at this point that a guy like Jordan, as great as he was, can actually lead a team to a championship. At the point I'm at in the book, they've just finished the regular season. They have the #1 team in the Eastern Conference. They have the best record of any Bulls team at that point, and every single person wants to leave. Jordan wants to leave because he's done with losing and wants to try something else. Scotty wants to leave because he's not getting paid enough. John Paxson and the rest of the guys, they just want the ball. Like, that'd be really nice if they just pass them the ball. But that's also not happening. Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson are butting heads. And this is a guy, like 8 years later, he's willing to leave a team for. And so it's a really fascinating time. Like, I think Sam Smith's amazing luck that he picked this year to write this book about the Bulls. And you can actually find that on Hoopla. I checked this morning. Finally, it wouldn't be me if there weren't talk about video games. I have taken a small break from Final Fantasy VII Remake to play Slay the Spire, which is on all the major consoles. We actually have copies of it at the library for the Switch and the PlayStation 4. It is your typical dungeon crawl game with one big twist. Instead of just giving commands to characters, you instead play cards from a hand of 5, and they have actions on them, and you get to choose a card to play, and hopefully you're able to do something to an opponent who you know what they're going to do, but you have to judge between whether or not you're going to try to damage them or whether you're going to try to block the thing they're going to do to you. As somebody who grew up in the 90s playing Magic the Gathering and then eventually got into like deck building board games, this is something that was very familiar to that genre of game, but it was just an interesting take on it that I never saw coming. That's what I've been doing, and I will now pass it on to Lori.
Thanks, William. I'd like to point out that William is doing a sports show through the library in addition to the other programs that we have, and you can find out all the schedules for those at the hplibrary.org, the website. So this week, I have been reading Simon the Fiddler by Palate, which I bought from Barbara's Bookstore, which is an independent bookstore. And Palate wrote News of the World, which I really loved. It was about a man who goes around the West reading old newspapers to illiterate people or people who just haven't heard the news, and takes place in the late 1800s. And this takes place at the end of the Civil War. And the main character, Simon, he plays the fiddle, and he has been avoiding the draft in any army, but he gets conscripted, and then it follows his adventure. I'm not too far into it. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm glad I bought it. I have not bought a book in a long time, so I'm glad I bought it. The other thing I was going to talk about is, if you're like me, you have random thoughts that come in your head. And recently I thought to myself, who's Billie Eilish? I had never heard her music. So I went on to Hoopla, and they do have one of her albums, and I listened to it, and you know what? I enjoyed it. So, you know, that's a nice thing about Hoopla, is that you can explore artists that you just always wondered about. And it's all available to you with your library card. And that's all I have to talk about today. So I'm going to pass it back to Sarah Marie. Thanks.
Okay, that is it for us today, folks. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for any comments, questions, or concerns you may have, and you can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/HPLibrary, through our Twitter, which is @HPLibrary, or via email, which is hppla@hplibrary.org. You can find this information online through our website, which is hplibrary.org as well. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned and links we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, everyone, this is us signing off. Until we see you next, stay safe.